Gregg Kavet attended a ski racing camp in Italy near the Swiss border. At one point during the camp, a few of the boys decided they wanted to ski the full slope of the Chilometro Lanciato, which is a slope often used for speed skiing. The end basically resulted in one friend leaving the group and walking solo across the glacier, subsequently falling 40 feet into a crevasse. There are way more lessons than you'd imagine from this episode. Tune in to hear them all. I hope you enjoy.
My name is Greg. I live in LA, and I generally do a lot of skiing, a lot of backcountry skiing. I'll go locally. I'll tour up in the Eastern Sierra and do trips elsewhere. But this story is about my first introduction to backcountry skiing, which happened a very long time ago, actually over 40 years ago, and an accident that occurred back then.
So what do you do for work?
I am a television and film screenwriter.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you again for being on the show. That's an amazing profession and a really cool place that you live because, yeah, Joshua Tree's right there. And you have the Eastern Sierras that are like you're about to talk about, I guess, is so incredible backcountry skiing in the Eastern Sierras and climbing too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not much of a climber, but the skiing there is insane. I mean, we have such a long season and I've really grown to love it. I started off, we would go up to Mammoth a lot and there's all these mountains on the way up. And now I feel like the whole way up and down, I'm just looking at each mountain being like, I haven't done that one yet. I haven't done that.
I can ski that. I can ski that. I can ski that. I can ski that. I can ski that.
Exactly. This endless playground up there. So yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
So anyways, I grew up actually on the East Coast outside Boston. And my dad was this super avid, actually still is a super avid skier. And so we skied up at Killington in Vermont. And we would go up constantly, 50 days a year, every weekend, all weather. And eventually I joined the ski team up there and raced for them. And so by the time I was about 14, I was a solid skier, but I was kind of an underperforming racer. I did mediocre basically. And I was very interested. I was going to high school and there'd be racing there. And I was interested in getting better. So we ended up finding this summer ski camp that took place in Europe. And the idea was I could go there and get some training and, get a little better. You go up basically high up on the glaciers in Italy and France and train gates. So I signed up for this thing. And when I get there, the program ended up being not quite as race oriented as I expected. I mean, they did have coaches and they did have instruction, but it was also really trying to be like a cultural experience, let you explore the towns and go to different places. And because it wasn't really as race-oriented as some of the other programs, I ended up being basically like the best skier at the camp. Like I won the trophy. I was the guy who could do everything. And for me, it put me in a really strange position because I certainly wasn't that skier at Killington. And in general, I was really small at the time. I was like this tiny kid and I was very introverted and was not going to be the person that generally leads people around at anything. But because I was the top skier there, I was put in this position where that was my role. Like I was the guy when we were deciding what to do was kind of deciding where we should go and what would be interesting to ski. And I had this crew of me and 3 other guys, and we would look for fun stuff to hit when we had free time. One of the guys in the group, his name was David. He was a little bit older than me. He was definitely taller and more self-assured. And he was kind of the leader when we were in town, and I was the leader up on the mountain. And the problem, which kind of comes into the story, is that while I was a really good skier, my experience was very limited to New England ski areas. I could handle cold weather, I could handle ice, I was okay on pretty steep stuff, but I didn't understand alpine environments at all. Like I had just never been in one. So I didn't know, New England, there's no avalanches, there's no glaciers, there's no crevasses.
Wind and ice.
Yeah, wind and ice. And so there's a whole host of things that right now when I go backcountry skiing are foremost in my mind. Those things, river crossings, things like that I pay a lot of attention to. And I knew none of it. I knew zero of any of that information before. So while I was kind of a good enough skier to get down anything where we were skiing, I wasn't ready to lead people off piste there. So we started off the camp and we were training at this place called Passo Stelvio. It's kind of on the eastern edge of Switzerland on the Italian side. And then we moved for the second area and cultural experience to Trevinia, which is the town that's directly opposite Zermatt in the Alps. So you're right near the Matterhorn. It's gorgeous. And there's like
Massive peaks everywhere.
massive peaks, massive glaciers up there. And they have a huge summer skiing up there. It's called the Mount Rosa Plateau. And you're kind of using lifts from both countries the whole time. And it's like a big scene. I mean, you would run into like legitimate, pro skiers and pro teams training there. And, it's kind of a big deal the way, I don't know, the way Mount Hood is or Mammoth is some years. And the normal process was we would train in the morning, as all these summer programs do. You kind of train in the morning when the snow's still firm. And once it gets soft, the training day is pretty much over. And we were given a choice. You could either go back down into town or you could free ski around, which, meant we'd go down and whatever, play video games or take advantage of the fact that Italy didn't have a drinking age and we were only 14. So we're doing this, and we've been skiing in Trevina for like a week, and we're starting to get bored. It's like this big, flat, low-angle, groomed glacier. It's just, it's okay for gates, but it's not that exciting. So we started exploring around. And one of the big things in Trevina is that it's a real epicenter of speed skiing, which isn't really that big a presence anymore, but in the 80s and 70s was kind of a big deal. Like it almost became an Olympic sport. And in speed skiing, you go to this like kind of steep slope. The guys will groom it with their skis. They kind of sidestep up the whole thing. And then you just point them down and they measure you across a time trap and you try to go, 128 miles an hour or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, they go very fast. 200K was kind of the record that was being broken around then. And in Trevina, well, in Italy, it's called the KL. And there's all these like, in Trevina, there'd be all these like stickers and posters that said KL, which is the Chilometro Lanciato in Italian, which means the flying kilometer. And in Trevina, the slope they had for it had been the big spot in like the early 70s and late 60s. But by this point in 82, there were too many crevasses and they weren't really holding events there anymore. But we knew where it was, and we loved going out to the spot where it previously been held. You could kind of go up to the top of the T-bars and then take a high traverse out, and you couldn't get to the top of it, but you could get about halfway down it and get on that slope. And so we'd get out there, we'd kind of look down. It was really steep for East Coast kids, and although not that steep, it was probably like 30 degrees. And we'd kind of like pop the skis straight down on our little 170s and then like get in a tuck and try to go as fast as we could till we got really scared and then start making some turns. And it was really fun. But I had this idea in the back of my mind that I really wanted us to do the full KL. I wanted to do it from the top, which you could not access from that traverse. And I didn't know how to do it. So I got out this map, or maybe I looked at a map at one of the ski area walls or whatever, and tried to figure out like how do we actually get there? And the way to do it was if you skied way down onto the Zermatt side, down onto the Swiss side, you'd eventually reach this tram that goes up the Klein Matterhorn, which is like the little Matterhorn. And it's the highest lift service place in Europe, I think. And from there, you were above the KL, and you could actually like go down a traverse, duck under a rope, and get to the top of it. But we had only been there like once before. I think as a group, we had taken that trim one time, and it wasn't something that I could ask the instructors to do. Like they were already kind of unhappy that we were traversing out to the halfway down the KL, and they were not going to be happy to take a full group down from the top. Some of the people probably wouldn't be able to handle it, and it was definitely kind of pushing the risk of what that camp was willing to do too much. So the only way we could really do it was on our own, and the only time we could really do it was to go through daily training, wait for it to end, then race down to the Zermatt side, get on that tram before it closes, then go up top and find the right place to duck under the ropes and hit this slope. And for anybody...
You really mapped it out.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're really trying to figure out, it's like, this is our plan. We're going to do this. But if anybody listening knows anything about glaciers or summer skiing, you kind of see the immediate problem, which is that it's summer, you're at 12,000 feet, the sun's insanely strong, and the snow gets really, really soft by late morning. So the crevasses open up and the snow bridges sag. And I don't know if it ever would have been super safe to do this, but it was definitely not safe when we were planning to go. And on top of that, we did anything you could do wrong, we did. We didn't bring any safety equipment. We didn't have extra clothes. We didn't have food. We didn't have water. Certainly didn't have like ropes or beacons or shovels. But much more beyond that, because most of that equipment was not available to us, we went really on our own. I mean, I didn't have a map. I had like this vague sense of where we needed to go. I'd never looked at it from above. There's very few features when you're up on a glacier to even get your bearings on. We had no way to communicate. It was way before cell phones, but we didn't have radios. We didn't even tell anybody because we were essentially sneaking out to do all this. So we were very, very much on our own. So on the day we were doing it, we kind of did our training for the day, waited for it to end, gathered up, and then sped down towards Vermont and got on this Klein Matterhorn tram. And when we got there, it was so late in the day that we're going up the tram and it stopped just for some mechanical problem. And the operator decided to get a head start on like shutting it down for the day. He has to like close up various vents and things like that. And I'm the smallest guy on this. So he comes up to me and he like kind of points at the roof, and I don't really know what he's talking about. And then he lifts me. There's an open skylight, and this tram is insanely high. It's got like, typical tram where it's got like 2 towers on the whole thing. He lifts me out of the top of the tram. So I'm like, waist or even like thighs above the roof of the tram, so I could reach out and like grab the skylights and pull them closed so he didn't have to do it at the top of the day, dangling like thousands of feet in the air.
Oh my gosh. As a 14-year-old boy, you're probably psyched.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
So we finally get up there, and the tram comes in one side of a mountain. You go through a tunnel and you come out the other side. So we pop out this other side, and it's got, spectacular views. You can see the Matterhorn and that kind of stuff. But again, there's not a lot to know where you are. It's just a big sea of white. So there's a trail that goes down from there, which leads back to the T-bars that we normally train on. And we know that we need to go down that trail for a bit. And then at some point, we're going to branch off to the right, duck under the rope, and hit the top of this KL slope. But I don't really know where it is. So we go a few hundred feet, and I'm like, yeah, I think this is it. We duck under and start to go down. The problem was that actual entrance, like where we should have ducked under, was far. It was about a kilometer south of there. So we were pretty far off where we need to be. And we ski down this nice open slope. And I remember thinking, like, this is really good skiing. It was like untouched. It was perfect corn. And now looking back, I realized, well, it was perfect corn because nobody had skied on that in months, maybe all year. I don't know. But we get to lower down on this slope, and we expect it to roll off to this 30 or 35 degree slope for the speed skiing. And we get down there, and it doesn't. And nothing's familiar. We look forward, and we're on a cliff, a massive cliff. It's like 600 feet high. It's half a mile wide, and we're like dead center. And we're all kind of freaked out because we know we're lost. But we were thinking, well, the good news is we didn't actually ski that far down, and it wasn't like it was particularly steep. All we got to do, it's going to suck. We're going to have to hike a while, but we just got to turn around and hike back up. And so we turned around to do that and look up. And the slope we had just come down, which was a really nice ski, was really, really scary looking from below. It was
like steep?
No, it was not steep. It was just littered with crevasses, and you could see them. You could see all the sagging snow bridges. You could see these like dark shadows where they were, and they were massive crevasses. And you could see our tracks. We went right over like 3 of them. I mean, we were just lucky they didn't break on the way down. And we're looking up, and there's zero chance we can hike up that thing, because even if they had held us on the way down, they're not going to hold us sidestepping over them on the way back up. And we all get really scared. There's 4 of us. We can see the T-bars way below, but we're really far. You can't signal from there. We're just specks. And we don't know how we're going to deal with this. But nobody's really in a position to rescue us. We haven't told anybody, and nobody can see us. So we're trying to figure out a way to get around this cliff and continue down. And the 2 options were either to basically go north along the cliff or to go south along the cliff and try to curve around the edges of it. And going north was really unfamiliar terrain. It was this slope right below the Klein Matterhorn that we had never skied. We'd never seen anybody ski it. I'm not sure there were ever tracks on it. But we could see most of it. You could kind of see where it went. And although it was really steep, it looked doable. It looked like a actually skiable trail. But even kind of more important than that was that the traverse over to it looked really good. It just looked like normal snow. Nothing was sagging. It was slightly downhill. It looked like a pretty easy push to get that way.
A promising option.
Yeah. So I was really pushing for us to go that way. David, who was kind of, the other main party, really wanted to go the other way, which was south. That led to, it would eventually lead to that KL slope. It led to stuff we'd skied before. And it had the added benefit that groomer that we'd started on was descending in that direction. So if we go far enough out that way, maybe we can hike back up to it. It might be that the distance between the groomer and where we stand as we traverse that way just isn't that far. There's no crevasses between them, and we can just get out of there without doing anything scary. The problem I saw with that was that the snow looked really bad. It just looked ripply and contoured, and I just felt like those. We don't know what of those are crevasses, and they might be crevasses that way, and that looks really scary. So we argued for a bit, and then all of a sudden, three of us were heading north the way I wanted to go, and David was going the other way.
Oh, the group split up.
We split up.
Yikes.
I don't really remember talking about it. We weren't like, well, I'm going this way and I'm going that way. It was just like,
yeah,
we were both kind of insistent, and we were both used to leading a little bit. And I think we didn't really come to an agreement. So my group is traversing around. We're staying right by the edge of the cliff as we get across the snow. And eventually we reach to where it starts sloping downhill. We get there and there's a really big crevasse, right where it rolls over, which is, I guess, kind of what you'd expect, or what I'd expect now, but I didn't really know that at the time. And we're looking at this crevasse and we don't really see a way around it. And at that point we turn around, let's see how David's doing. And we couldn't see him, which seemed really good. Maybe he'd probably already gotten around the edge of that cliff, or maybe he'd gotten back up to that traverse and he was on his way down. We were talking, maybe he'd send somebody up to rescue us. And even if he wasn't, it seemed like, well, he had made it, it should be a pretty safe way. So we turned around and we were going back, and it was definitely harder. We were it was still mostly a traverse, but it was now a solid uphill traverse, you're sidestepping every step, and we're having to get around little variations in the cliff, and the snow's really wet and heavy by this point. And I remember one of the other kids in our group is he really wanted to take off his skis because it was just hard to walk with them. And I was maybe the only good decision of the day. I said, we should keep them on. I was like, if we're near a crevasse, with the skis, we're at least spread out. We have a little bit of chance of it not collapsing. If we're walking, I think we'll go through. So we decided to keep them on, and it made for really sluggish walk, but we kind of kept going. So eventually we get back to this original stopping point where we'd split up from David, and we pick up his tracks that are going south. And we don't see him. He's definitely gone. So we're really excited to get out of there. So I begin to kind of move a little faster and get ahead of the two other boys. And as I'm going along, it turns slightly uphill. He's trying to get more towards that traverse. And from his tracks, I could tell he took off his skis. So he's walking up in his boots. And I keep my skis on, but I'm following his boot pack. And then I get a little farther ahead and I see something. And I get closer to it and I realize it's a pair of skis and a pair of poles. And they look like somebody just tossed them on the ground.
That's strange.
And then I see a small hole, really small, maybe 2 feet across, right in the center of it. So he had broken through a snow bridge and had fallen into this crevasse. And I can hear him yelling. And he's really hoarse. He's been screaming for a long time at this point. He's super scared, which makes me really scared. And I got there. I didn't look in the hole. I didn't yell back to him at all. I don't totally know why. I think part of it was I was afraid he might be really banged up in bad shape, and I didn't want to see that. I think I didn't want to give him false hope because I didn't really have a way to get out of there. And also, I didn't really want to get too close to that hole because I didn't know where the crevasse started and ended. And so I kind of gave it a wide berth and just kept going. I was actually listening to your podcast about the crevasse rescue on Mount Baker a few weeks ago. I was just feeling bad about not yelling down to him. It's clearly a really terrifying place to be. And for him, I felt like there was no chance of anybody finding him. I mean, we had gone the other direction. I don't think, yelling's not going to help, but nobody was coming up there. I felt like I really wish I had said something or yelled something to at least give him a sense of there's some chance here. But anyways, after realizing he was down there, I felt this urgent need to get out of there. I did not want to hike up. I didn't want to be slowly going over a crevasse. I wanted to get help and do it quickly. And I felt kind of the same way when we'd skied down, we'd gone over a bunch of crevasses, just carried by our speed. I felt like if I could get downhill, my speed might help me and really carry me over these snow bridges.
Where were the other two?
I did not wait for them to tell them what my plan was. I felt like there was like real urgency at this point, and I just really wanted to figure out a way to get help if I could. So I basically like kind of just turned downhill. I remember thinking like I'm like doing my best to like emulate these like speed skiers. Like that's what I want to do. I want to just point it and like carry what I can. I don't know. I've looked at it on like Google Earth and stuff, and it may well have changed since then because these glaciers are all receding. But it's kind of a crappy looking area. You can just tell it's a very broken up zone on that glacier. And I do remember going down and feeling like it really felt like a movie where like everything's collapsing all around you, but you're kind of untouched. Where it's just that moment of like I don't know why this is working, but it kind of is. So I just remember going down, feeling like a disaster movie, but kind of skimming over it all. And pretty soon I was at the bottom and back on the groomed trail. So I skied down to the base of the T-bar, and there was still some lift. It was still going. There were lift ops there, and I'm yelling to them, and they only speak Italian, so we're trying to communicate. But I start pointing up at this cliff, and eventually they kind of got the message of like there are people up there. So I wait a little bit, but nobody's really around. I don't have anybody to talk to or tell. So actually, I start making my way back to the tram to head down for the day. But I see the helicopter go overhead up to the cliff top. And what had happened was my two friends had gotten really close to where David was by the time the helicopter got there. And helicopter came down. He was about around 15 meters down in this crevasse, kind of wedged in.
15 meters. So
like 40 feet.
40 feet. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 35 or 40 feet, I think.
Can you imagine that being a 14-year-old boy and being 40 feet, 15 meters down inside a crevasse, screaming for who knows how long, wondering if anybody's going to find you? Oh my gosh. Like,
I mean, screaming at least a half hour, I think, like before I got there. A long time.
And there's no way that you guys were wearing, like, you weren't wearing probably puffy jackets. You weren't dressed because this was going to be a quick mission. No one was going to find you.
Yeah, we weren't wearing anything appropriate. And he was wedged, is what he said later. Like he was stuck front and back in the crevasse. And the helicopter, basically, they had, I think, a very small guy went in, and David said he had a helmet. And basically he went under him and like pushed with using the helmet like on his legs or butt, basically, to pop him out of where it was really tight. And once he got above that, he kind of like bear hugged him or somehow held him, and I assume got a harness on him, although I'm not 100% sure. And then they were able to use the winch on the helicopter to pull him up. And my two other friends also got on that helicopter and got the heli ride down. So I kind of got on the tram going back down. I remember running into the head of the camp, who had somehow by then found out what had happened and was
pissed.
No, actually super relieved. I think he was really, really happy that nobody had died on his trip. And like, I mean, obviously I think he'd been scared as that maybe he was told when the helicopter was going up there. I don't totally know, but at that point he had heard that they had been rescued and was very, very pleased about it. And yeah, I mean, being 14-year-old kids, we didn't really like debrief or talk that much about it. We kind of heard the excitement of the helicopter, but not that much about how terrible it was. And honestly, like even I almost never have told anybody about this story. Like I think I maybe wrote it on some college applications, but other than that, it's been I haven't really talked about it too much.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's scary. It's a very, so many things could have gone so much worse in that moment and it was so much, I think, pinned on all of us, but especially me for kind of planning that it's a little embarrassing. I mean, it just feels like doing the wrong thing and getting away with it and not being particularly proud that you did.
It seems like you seem a little like you feel a little guilty too. Like you.
I mean, I do. I don't feel. I mean, in one hand, it's nobody was actually hurt, so in that way, it's not the way it could have been, but it easily could have been something else. I mean, He very, very easily could have died. Honestly, all of us could have died up there.
You could have too. Yeah, I mean, yeah, any of you, like one of you guys could have slipped over the 600-foot cliff. I mean, there's so many what ifs that we could just sit here and tease out, right? But I mean, it's a pretty remarkable story. All four of you probably have epic views and perceptions of how it all went down, and you probably all have your own learnings from the event too.
For me, there's kind of like two levels of it. The really basic level is knowing what we did wrong, which is in a way almost like trivial. I feel like there's a ton of mistakes. They're not the kind of mistakes I feel like I would make now, or even most adults would make. It's like we went at a very dangerous time. We didn't tell anybody. We didn't have a way to find the proper route. We didn't have any safety equipment. We didn't stay together. We didn't talk about our plan and organize as a unit. But almost more than that, I think about the way we processed risk at 14 years old and how differently we approached it than adults do. And because I have kids, those are the lessons that seem kind of more important to me. And sort of on that, I mean, the first thing that came out of it was that there's a real tendency to default to saying no or don't do that when a kid wants to do something that's dumb or dangerous or not a good idea for a variety of reasons. It's kind of easy to say no
as a parent.
And I think there's a real danger in it, because when you say no on a wide variety of questions, most of the time the kids are going to listen. Most of the time they're going to not do what you said no to. But the problem is that when they're really eager to do something and you've said no to it, you've become part of the problem. Like you're the obstacle they're getting around. And I feel like in this case, that was definitely part of what was going on. We were not allowed to do that traverse out to the lower part of the KL. I feel like because we were told no, we were sneaking around, which made everything significantly more dangerous.
Like a forbidden fruit.
And the second thing is that when there's danger, I feel like, or I try to explain it in very specific terms to the kids. Like I feel like if we'd gone out to the traverse and been told, these are crevasses, they warm up during the day, you don't want to be near them, period, but you really don't want to be near them alone or late or away from help. And we didn't really have that information. We didn't have a way to distinguish like the traverse, which was, not 100% safe, but a reasonably safe thing that lots of people were doing, from trying to ski from the top, which was a really dumb choice. So with my kids, I try to be very specific about what the problems are. I'm like, we're going over a creek. I'm like, if you fall in this creek with your pack buckled, you could definitely drown here. Like this is a big issue.
No, and why?
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to explore that area, you need a way to find your way back and survive the night if you can't. I mean, that's the minimum. Or even little things like if you're going to ski that jump, you need to get a spotter below. You don't know who's coming across. Like you need to think about both the action and the risk involved and also mitigate that risk. And the third thing I feel like I learned from it is that the advice about danger needs to be earned, not just offered. There's lots of things kids do that are really, as an adult, are really dumb ideas. They're going to climb up big slippery rocks. They're doing jumps. They're flipping into water. But I try to really distinguish or try to not be too concerned when I think what they're doing doesn't have big consequences. I'm almost willing to have them see them get mildly hurt just to make sure they're listening when I distinguish something as really dangerous. And I think I do that enough and try to make that distinction that when I say something, when I say don't do something or this is really dangerous, they're going to listen because I'm not the guy who says that very often. Like it's a rare thing when I'm like, you really got to watch out here. And the fourth thing, which I feel like somewhat connects into not taking off the skis during the traverse when we were walking out of there, which was maybe the one good move of the whole thing, is that I don't want to shy away from suffering when the kids are in the backcountry or on an adventure. Like I'm not trying to make the trip miserable. I really want them to have fun in the outdoors, and we do a lot to do that. But I also think there's a ton of value in pushing their limits in some way.
And finding their limits.
Finding their limits, exactly. I mean, one, it tells them what they're capable of. We had a thing where we got in a tricky situation this summer, and we had to hike out at kind of at dusk, like about 8 miles after having already done a lot of hiking. But the good thing is they know they can do that. Like you've already done that. We've done a hard hike right at the edge of night. And while it sucked, it was doable. And the second thing I feel like pushing those limits does is it reinforces that idea that if we're talking about danger, if I'm mentioning a specific risk, it's serious. Like I don't really have a strong reaction if they're fatigued or if their feet hurt or if the pack's uncomfortable. Like
That's not going to kill them.
Right. I'm trying to help and I'm trying to make them comfortable, but I'm not treating it like an emergency is the difference. And the key thing there is to know, I want them to know that like suffering is not danger. It's not the same thing. And in a lot of ways, like being willing to suck it up, to stay calm and just suffer, like to keep those skis on and sidestep up this crappy thing instead of walking your boots is often exactly what gets you out of danger.
Having grit and being tenacious and having grit for sure is important characteristic of anybody to have when they're going to be in the outdoors.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are the main things. I just felt that it's so interesting how differently kids at that age think about stuff that I try to get a little bit more into my head at that age and apply it to other kids at that age and try to keep them safe.
I love that. And I think that's one thing that I've really been trying to figure out, Greg, is, I'm 37. And when I was younger, I was fearless. I had no fear about anything. And I would push and flirt with my limits, what I thought were my perceived limits. I'd go way past those, and like I said, I was fearless. And now looking back on so many things that I've done in my life, I'm like, what the hell? Because I think I would never do that. And I don't know if what I cannot figure out is, am I more fearful because I'm older, or am I more fearful because now I have the experience and the knowledge of all the what ifs? I don't know why I'm more scared now than I was before. So that's kind of what I've been grappling with the last couple of years of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an element of both in there. I mean, it's definitely, as you see things happen, you realize they're not theoretical. They're like, it happens to a friend of yours or it happens to you or, I'm sure doing this podcast, you've met so many people who have gotten in real trouble from, oftentimes really minor mistakes or really little errors at the beginning that kind of added up. But yeah, I also think just age itself does do some of it. I mean, I think about stuff differently, and I'm certainly like less willing to get hurt and less willing to do things that have incredibly high consequences just because I know it can go wrong and I know that's not what I want.
Right. Yeah, you make a good point. It's like I've interviewed probably over 150 people for the show, and I've gotten, twice as many submissions. And so it's just maybe hearing part of it is the first two that I brought up earlier, but also maybe what you just suggested was the element of being, producing the show, like hearing trauma after trauma after trauma, and that like just being more scared because of everybody's experiences. That could be a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain, lack of knowledge can sometimes help you avoid the fears. If you don't know how bad it's going to be, it's not necessarily a good idea, but it does make you more willing to do things.
Well, thank you very, very much for sharing your story with us.
Sure. It was, this was fun.
Thank you so much to Gregg for sharing your story, and thank you for listening to my podcast. Thank you to Rocky Talkie, the American Alpine Institute, and Desert Mountain Medicine for sponsoring this episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you want more content, head on over to Patreon and sign up. There are so many more bonus episodes that you can learn from, exclusive to Patreon supporters. And as always, remember, play hard and be smart.